we're ready to start. So this is now for all of us the last talk conference. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending this and other talks. And the feedback we have gotten from the team, which is getting back from you guys, is that you like the conference very much. And therefore, before I start my talk, I'd like to emphasize that next year there's a very high probability we'll do this again. And if you like, we can have a little bit of a question and answers after the talk also about the conference. And there's maybe also some things which we can do. But let's get started. Motivation. I think motivation is the most important thing if you talk about founding local user groups and local communities for C++, because people are only going to do it if they're motivated. For me personally, my main motivation in starting the whole thing, which actually later put me in the position to organize this conference, is to meet other people who use C++, but are not from my domain. So I worked for 5 years at Vodafone, and I worked on some other projects for a longer time, so you get to know the people and you have the colleges and stuff, and etc. But mostly, often you're working in the same domain, you're using the same compiler, you're having probably not everybody writing the same code, but there's not a big of variety of using C++ in companies often. And so for me, it's a way to get in contact with people who have a different history in C++ and who might also be using C++ in a very different way that I have seen it. And so one of the ideas behind getting those user groups run to get people to exchange their thoughts on C++, on ideas, on frameworks, and exchange the knowledge. And there's a lot of people out there who are interested in that. As I know, we have now in Germany already 2 user groups running, and we're preparing to maybe get started more. And of course, another important thing is to educate people, because when you visit BoostCon or C++ Now this year or other conferences, you meet a lot of people who have a very high understanding of C++. But out there in the field, there's many others which probably are not in the situation that they can go to a conference, or maybe not even have the interest to go to a conference because they think that they're already good enough in C++. And in a lot of companies, there is a certain thing of understanding that as long as everything goes well, it's okay, and educating people is a cost that a lot of companies like to save. So this is a way to reach more people without having the drawbacks, which are drawbacks is a stupid translation for that, but without having the effort for people to get to the conference side, to be here. And a conference is very much different than a user group, which meets once a month usually and has an evening with a talk or a discussion. And what was very nice was when we had in October, on the same week like the C++ community, our meeting, and I could arrange a Skype talk with Michael. And so we had the possibility to basically get live results from Aspen, from Portland. And now, maybe some background how I got started with community work. How many of you know what MeeGo is or was? Alright. So basically, MeeGo was a platform built on top of Qt for mobile devices, but also for other hardware. For example, there was a plan to implement it for cars, so you have a car entertainment system running on this, for tablets, for mobile phones, and it was originally being pushed forward from Intel and Nokia. And as time went by, the fate of MeeGo was not the best, and last year MeeGo was more or less being put aside by Intel, and Nokia skipped over to Windows Phone way before that. And I had, in the one and a half years before, I had started doing local community work for Nokia and for Intel in this region, and trying to organize meetings for people interested in MeeGo and Qt. And for myself, I was interested in having people to exchange their thoughts on Qt and C++ and maybe how to develop apps with it. And as this went last year to a point where it was that MeeGo had no future and we would not be able to actually host anything in that direction, I realized that one of my key motivations for doing it was C++, and I'm specialized in C++ as a freelancer. So I decided, if we want to see if there's any interest in exchanging thoughts on something, it might be C++ the best thing to start with, because C++ is a very broad topic and we don't have to focus on something. And so this is a way, at least I thought it that way, that it's a more independent way. So it's also the reason why we started this whole thing without the contact I had at Nokia right into it from the first day, independent, and I organized it over, for one example, the Xing group, and which I have been running now for 4 years. And that's how some of the contacts got to our meetings. And there's actually Jörg in the room. He is more or less the person in charge for making sure that we have the room at the Chaosdorf, where we meet once a month now. And through the work on MeeGo, I got in contact with him, and one of my most important problems was solved through that, of having a place to meet, because we'll later get back to that. Locations for those meetings are actually of a problem. So I decided to focus on C++ and Qt, etc. As I was, or I am a Qt ambassador, also Qt is kind of important to me, but I see that the focus is more on C++ than on Qt. And well, last year December we kicked off the user group. The first presentation was about what we actually wanted to do and what we planned for the future, and a little bit about C++, 11 and Qt 5, if I remember right. And the next talk we had was a talk about an introduction of C++, which was very cool. And since then, we basically have meetings once a month with about 10 to 15 people usually attending. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. In the spring we had some unfortunate days where we met. It was a public holiday, or after a public holiday, so a lot of people couldn't come. And on one day we had like a public strike, so people who would like to use the public transportation could not come. And so this is sometimes things you have to see. That's not always you're having success at the first time. Now, maybe I'd like to talk also about how you could get involved into a local user group if there already exists one. First, it's always good to organize meetings. So if you actually are interested in, being active in a user group, let us, being active is actually, I think, the best point. You can do talks about C++. There's probably some issue in C++ you'd like to present. It might be some library, it might be some feature of C++ 11, it might be some way you would like to show your code, or maybe improving your code. There's a lot of topics you can do, and even if you have no presentation, you could do like a hackathon, have people write code or show their code. And there's a lot of different formats you can pick. And there might be more out there, but the currently active user groups, which I know of, which exist today and are still active today, are in Düsseldorf, which we founded last year. Belgium is active since this year. I'm not sure when they exactly started. I know they started this year, so I said that's January, might be February or something, I don't know. And Berlin was kind of a trade-off from Aspen, because in Aspen I met Carsten, who is now with some other people active in Berlin and organizing this user group, and they had their first meeting in October, and they will have the second meeting again next, I think that's next week. It could be next week in Berlin. It's actually in this month, third Tuesday. And now, as you might not be from those cities or from Belgium, how to get your own user group started? What are the ways to try to get that running? So I put together a little receipt, and it might not always work, but I think the probability that this works out is pretty high. And so you basically can cook up your own C++ user group with this. And what you need are first people who are willing to participate. Because of course, if you organize a talk or something, you need people willing to listen to it. And you need a location for meetings, which is, especially when you do talks, not that easy, because you need a projector, you need this, and of course you need ideas, topics, and talks. That's something which I'm actually impressed in, that we had. That was one of my biggest concerns, having a shortage in talks, not having enough people willing to do a talk, and kind of running short after a few months with talks, and the whole thing goes flat again, and we never meet again because we don't have ideas. But that didn't come. We actually have talks quite often still, and until now we have for every month a topic, and for next year we're still looking actively for speakers. So if you're interested to do a talk in Düsseldorf, and in Belgium, or in Berlin, or in some other user group that you might want to attend if they get funded, we might get you into contact if you like. And well, it's kind of surprising, but a really important point is to get started. I've made the experience that since I'm organizing this thing in Düsseldorf now with Jörg and some others, and also that level is also supplying a lot of talks to our user, which is actually for this. I've met a lot of people contacting me and saying, hey, why not organize something like this in my town? And I usually don't get an answer back if I say, well, it's a nice idea, but why not try to organize it yourself, or trying to motivate to organize it. It seems to be often a little bit hard, but if you have a few people who are agreeing that they would like to have that, it's usually at the point where you can get started. Once you're started, it's more easy to get the thing running. And now, I think it's probably good to know a little bit more about the ingredients we have for our user group. Now, first, where you find C++ people or people interested in C++. I mean, there might be some, I know actually it's still an interesting story which I found out through the user group. There's a bunch of people doing Java, but they actually would like to get back to C++. Yeah, they program Java for bread and butter, but they're very loud with C++. So, well, there's your very own network. That's the first thing I think. If you're a C++ programmer, you might know some other people who do that too. And if you're looking at a company and you're not the only guy doing C++ in your company, you might know a lot of people which are already from the region, which could help you starting this. Obviously, there's the internet, and it's sometimes possible to find local people over the internet. It's not always that easy. but the internet can later have used better information about it, and we'll get back to it later. Social networks. I've never experienced that Twitter and other social networks can be a little bit helpful in getting the word out and maybe also getting some people contacted who are not in your personal network, but you could be connected over Twitter or somebody thinks that's interesting and he retweets it and you're connected over 2 or 3 points to another person which is in your area and which is interested to come. And yeah, well, that's one point I want to emphasize, and because I would not have started this alone, and it was for me very, very important that I have at least one person who is responsible for the location. And so if you find a few others who are willing to participate in it, that's a very good thing. And you can try to start this thing alone, but it's basically one thing, my personal opinion is it's bad to be a single point of failure. So you should always have a few people which in any case could replace me is probably a stupid word, but who also organize and do some work, and maybe you can that way split up the dependencies and get people have certain functions. Like, for example, in our user group, Jörg is more or less the contact to the place where we have our meetings, and he takes care of that the place is open, because it's not always open, and also he makes sure that there's no other meetings scheduled when we have our meetings. So I don't have to look for a place or make sure that we have the right to be in the room, not somebody else is scheduled there. Now, location. Actually, first when I started community work, that was really hard to find location. That's you can change it very easily if you take some money in your hand, and you can rent a room everywhere. But for me, it always was important that we have kind of not somebody needing to sponsor this or to have some money in the background for getting rooms or something. So first location, which is obviously is a bar or restaurant, and I think if you've been to the hotel bar yesterday or the night before, you know that you can have pretty good casual meetings at a bar and get people to know and have talks about C++. So the bar is actually not a bad place to meet, but with presentations, well, some bars have rooms, then maybe you'll be able to do a presentation there, but you also have the problem that you have a certain expectation from the bar, from the restaurant, that they earn a certain profit from drinks and stuff, and you might have to change your locations as you might not be able to fulfill this quote or what they like to see there. And there's another interesting place where now actually we are placed in a hackerspace in Düsseldorf. And this concept of having a hackerspace is actually not so well known, I think. So first I'd like to ask who of you has been to a hackerspace? Okay, that's nice. Well, I think I have to explain a little bit of the concept of a hackerspace. A hackerspace is basically a place where some nerds who also like to be a bit more social, organized. It's usually in Germany a group of people who have rented a room or rented an apartment, or it's differently, and they run a space where people can come, they can make hardware there, they can do software there. Sometimes those places are very small because they are usually founded and financed by the members, and some places like we have in Düsseldorf, but also in bigger cities, I think, usually they have the room to accommodate the needed things for having a meeting there. And also a big advantage is that you have already a lot of people which are technically interested in the hackerspace. So you automatically gain a group of people for your user group which you probably without the hackerspace would not have ever known. And other things which I experienced is that in hackerspaces often you have people which are well connected. So you gain access to universities, etc. So that this whole thing works out better for you maybe. The problem is, of course, when you have not been to a hackerspace, you might not have an idea how to find one. Because it's not like that they're around on every corner. Though there's a website called hackerspaces.org. And one cool feature which they have a map. They have a map of hackerspaces in Europe. And I'm not sure if Madrid is not listed or if Madrid has a hackerspace. But you see, Germany, the British and Ireland, and it goes up to Scandinavia. There's actually in every bigger town in our country and in other countries in Europe too a hackerspace. And those are only the active ones. They also have kind of a database for historic hackerspaces, and because some hackerspaces, as they show up, some also really go down and are not anymore active because their members quit or something, low financing in this area. But there's some hackerspaces which are really old. For example, in Berlin, the T-Base is quite old and quite well known. And the car store. How old are you?
12 years.
12 years. So, and if I get back to location for a short while, and of course, there's always the possibility to have a company which has a room for meetings. And the plus point which I see there is you have a room which is sponsored, could be like a room like here, and you have all the technique you need, you have a beamer. Usually, sometimes the company also sponsors the things. While this is probably a very good plus point for your guests and the people which will then later kind of form the user group, I think it's dependency to the company which usually has their own agenda, and there's some companies who do that on a particular basis, but you should make sure that you know what you're up. And for example, in Belgium, the user group meets at Microsoft, which is not from Microsoft that they host the user group, but maybe some people are not attracted because of that. Because I don't know if you're a cute guy, if you're a nice guy, and I was already covered in the conference that people think that it's more like a Microsoft C++ user group, and it's actually they actually try to be open and try to have a real C++ user group. And for example, last time they had to talk about CPP-NetLab, which is not going to be one-to-one understanding, but what it was currently discussed as for networking for one of the deep implementations. And Dean Beresford started this work and is currently doing very good work on this. And in my opinion, it's better to be independent, and so if you have an hackerspace, contact those people, try to get in contact and visit them. As most of us, I think, qualified to be enriched, it's also a very nice place to just have an event in there and get the people to know. And, well, ideas, topics, talks is another really into course. It should be C++ related. And for me, still one of the key points is to have people learn about C++, to help them advance in their own knowledge and maybe to give them another perspective on C++ and of course C++11. And there's of course frameworks and libraries. I mean, Boost. I did a presentation about Boost in May, and I counted the libraries in Boost, and it's I think right now over 100 libraries in Boost. So you could talk for years about libraries in Boost. Qt, with Qt files is of course something. There's WS widgets, there's gaming frameworks, there's everything in C++ actually which you can do the software. And people might be wanting to do a talk about that and interested in it. And as I said, actually, yeah, it's kind of important to get started because some people think when we started in Berlin, some people was for some people confusing that in the social network where the event was published, I only can publish the event, so it goes to all members of the group. So people thought that I attend, and they thought that I do not attend, and then they thought that it would be cancelled. And we had even one comment saying like that said we better should cancel the talk because I would not show up. And at the end of the evening, we had 20 people in Berlin. And so there's always some people who don't expect this thing to work out. And also, there's fluctuation quite common. So people who show the first time up might come back the third or fifth or fourth time. And it's, as I told earlier, it's sometimes also that there's a certain event which is not related to your user group, which makes it for some people hard to travel at that day. And if it's a strike or if it's a storm, you might. For now, we did not cancel any meeting, but sometimes it's just that there are 2 or 3 people which are attending the talk, or 4 people, 5 people. That's possible, and don't get stopped by that, and try to be more proactive and to try to get it really running. And which is also kind of important that you try to find the dates, and maybe if you're able to, the topic or talk for the next meeting. This obviously is then needed when you have a location where you know that you can meet the next time. So that's also, of course, go to that location to meet them. So, some facts from the conference. I did a little analysis, and there's actually quite a few people from France, which could start a user group in Paris and in Toulouse, maybe. So, in Denmark, we have quite a few Danish people also. I believe it's 9 people. And in the Netherlands, we also have some people on the conference from the Netherlands, and I do also know some other people from the Netherlands which couldn't make it to the conference. But, and yeah, like this could start in those countries along from the people visiting the conference, and there's probably a little more C++ programmers around the area where those people come from. I'd like to talk a little bit about how I might help you, because I'd like to give you the support for founding the user group, which I can. And first of all, there's in the English section, the German section is currently not visible. There is an events and a user group section. And the events calendar will also have other C++ events which I get a hold of and list those. And there's there will be for every user group a special page where they can announce their talks, and people might in the future want to go and look there if they get interested and want to know if there's where's the next user group meeting for them in their area. In Germany, I have the option to put up an event at Xing, which is I founded 4 years ago the Modern C++ group on Xing, and it's currently having 4,400 members and about 3,800 people we can reach with that. Unfortunately, I cannot target people by region, though I always have to send those invitations to everybody. I think it's not going to change. That's one of the things I'm not really looking forward to do, but it has to be that I mean, if you don't want to be invited to events, you can switch that off, and so I guess everybody who gets those invitations is interested in it. And this is actually how you could, maybe, I hope it will work for you, get started your own local C++ user group. And for Germany, in fact, I know that we have an investing soon, the user group, maybe starting, which will be Peter, also we have talk on CUDA with Carsten. And there's some other towns where we're currently looking at in Germany and in Europe. If you're interested, then you can contact me and contact, of course, the people that you know from the region. And if there's a guest space, then you just have to do it in a guest space. So you should try to get it running there. And as I said, if I can help you out with anything, if you have any questions, I will try to do so. And questions?
Hello, can you tell us how communication with sponsors and companies works? How do you start communication? How do you keep contact, come in contact? How do they respond? Do they ask something in return and stuff?
This is actually a little problem. Because
don't hold back. So I'm
no, not that bad. Actually, I wanted to prepare a slide about funding, because actually you don't need money to get your user group started. That's not the case. There are sponsors which might want to sponsor your local user group, but as far as I've seen and I've worked with companies together from Eagle, it was always hard to get funding for events or for rooms, etc. And if you're having a company which is interested or which is actually giving you a room and giving you maybe also a beamer and giving you free drinks, that's a nice thing to have, but that's very different locally. So, for example, there might be Intel in your city, and you might have a contact to Intel. But you also need the right contact. It's who is the person who is supporting this and has the ability to get those rooms and maybe has internal the budget of bringing some drinks on the table. And I have my contacts to Intel. This is Monica, for example. She's active in the marketing department from Intel in Germany. And as far as I've seen, how to say that, Monica is a very positive example. Because with other companies, I have made an experience that often you write an email and you not get an answer, or you get an answer a few weeks later. And I know from other persons that not all companies that say they're sponsor actually will also give you money for it. So I know from events which were basically also founded on sponsor money, and they had then to bring in lawyers to get the sponsor money. So don't build on something you don't have.
Can I maybe add to this on the company corporate side? So we all have our personal agenda. I usually be very blunt and open about this, also with Jens. So I don't hold back. So this is what I'm telling you. This is what I need you to do. Then in return, maybe once a year or once in a while, I need to have someone from Intel representing, talking about a specific Intel topic. Because I have to justify every money I spend, every budget, regardless of the size. So this is what I'm doing, so I'm being open, and this is usually helps me. Sometimes it works out, like at the C++ conference here, and sometimes it just doesn't usually gains what someone else understands. So that's, but as Jens said before, every company has its own agenda, and then it's a question if you agree with them or not, and also always think about it. There's always a possibility of having an agenda, so you might don't want to know, and I would also recommend you to start independent.
Yes, and I might ask the audience who of you likes marketing.
I do.
It is one important thing I learned in Aspen, and I learned on some occasions. I know my personal also is why I did this conference, because I wanted to have a way to get actually topics interesting with C++, etc. on the table. And the problem is that I don't know who of you would have shown up or be so positive about the conference if I would have sold out to sponsor the conference and cut the ticket prices in half, and then have maybe people from all kinds of companies trying to sell you products and talks. Like I see it on other conferences sometimes, or get the feedback from it. And so, for the start, be independent. I have contacts to Intel, I have contacts to BlackBerry, and if you get a user group running, it's not very unlikely that BlackBerry will come one day and do a talk there. But also BlackBerry, again, has the same problem. They have their agenda. I said it on one slide, companies without an agenda are rare. I mean, maybe things like that. So, they all want their product placement or something else, and also, as I said, in Belgium, I have from a few attendees the feedback that they're like, that they like the user group there, but they think it's too much Microsoft, and they would like to see that more independent. But again, the problem is this user group will not get independent from Microsoft if not other people join it and voice their opinion. So if you want to get started, that's also why I started this last year with some other people from the region, but without any companies behind it or being interested in this. Because I did not want to have any agenda, and I did not want I wanted to be able to do my own decisions, and I don't want to go too deep in the sponsoring agreements for this conference, but in my agreement there was one thing, that there was a possibility for gold sponsors to place one talk, which every gold sponsor did until we had the close, until we had the schedule done. But I also had the strict rule that if you don't have a talk that's not related to C++, I'm kicking it out. Because that was a requirement. Your talk has to be related to C++. And that requirement will stay for next year. Because I'm not interested in having people talking about something else than C++ in this conference, because I think that's basically my goal to focus on.
Maybe just maybe just a little hint, if you want to talk in a local group, basically ask local leaders or some people, software developers, companies, maybe they can help you because they're interested to meet new people sometimes. Or they're just interested in C++ too. That could be quite easy. We had a sponsoring issue where we get hardware from a very big German company. Unfortunately, this hardware was used and it doesn't work very well. And there was also a local dealer who just came to us and gave us new hardware for free, without asking for logo on the website or something else. Just come in contact with local persons, with local dealers and software companies. Maybe they're just maybe they're interested to cooperate with you.
Questions?
When you started your first user group, did you worry about the quality of content you're presenting in this group? Because obviously, a lot of the user group can't have the same quality of content as conference in Aspen or conference, which attracts people from all over Europe.
Of course, not every talk has the quality like we have in Aspen. Some do, some not. You have to find out which people should present and maybe which people should not present. I have personal opinion that we, for now, in my own user group, had mostly very good people presenting. In Berlin, the first presentation was in fact about Cube 5 and Paylet, which I don't think was a bad presentation. And next time we'll have in Berlin a 20-minute talk about reflection in C++, the upcoming reflection implementation, or standard implementation for this. And afterwards, Carsten Arndt will talk about his library Boost ODE, which he did in Aspen and also in this conference. So you have to see from which pool of people you can draw your speakers. But I have made that experience that usually if you have reached a certain size of the user group, you will have enough people to do it. And as I said, I have also contacts to BlackBerry, which is obviously interested to talk to the community. So for now, we are not having yet a date, but we will have to talk and if we get started in Dresden, they're probably also going to go into travel to Dresden. And on the long run, we might be able to exchange papers between user groups which are kind of close together. Any more questions? Also, one more point. As we started last year, we had the first evening, and I felt like people from Düsseldorf and maybe some close by towns come. And in fact, we have people traveling to those evenings as far as almost 100 miles, and 100 miles, 100 kilometers. For example, Detlef, he comes from Aachen, which is almost in Beijing. And we have other members coming from Dortmund, which is the other end of the Ruhrgebiet, which is also not really close by. So if you get that started and people get to know it, you can often draw from a very, very wide area with people into it, because C++ user groups are quite not very well known and also not very well organized currently. I'd like to change that, and also there are not very many active user groups, which I also would like to change. So, okay. Then, is there any more questions?